also live on via a screen share. We are live on Twitch, Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter on my campaign profiles. Corey, thank you for your engagement, because we've been connected here on TikTok for a bit, and it is encouraging to be connected to some politicians that we may not see eye to eye on everything. I think our platforms are pretty closely aligned, though. But we may not.
Similar,
Yeah, we don't see eye to eye on everything, I'm sure, and it's nice to see that you're willing to engage, jump on a live, and just have a conversation, because I think this is what's sorely missing in politics as a whole, is just people getting together and chatting, right, and just saying, hey, like, here are the real issues. Let's talk about it, and try to come to some understanding on our differences, and then work towards ultimately helping society, right? I mean, like, that's kind of the point of government, is to help the people. So at least that's what it's supposed to be.
Well, it really depends on, I guess, your philosophical perspective.
That's what we're
I know that
told.
you're running a human rights
Yeah.
campaign, and I am running a progressive campaign. When I use the word progressive, anytime I'm doing sort of like voter education, that phrase comes from the era where FDR was president. The progressive era, and what that does mean is it is the belief that government has the means and a moral obligation to use those means to help people.
Yeah. I'll
But
agree with that one.
some people believe that you just gotta get it out the mud, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, et cetera,
Right.
which is a phrase that was used sarcastically since its inception. That's now become sort of like used and abused, misused and abused.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's similar to the phrase, and I'm going to be putting it on my campaign page as a part of my qualifications, because people keep asking, and it's like, yeah, I should probably answer that at some point. When I first launched the website, it was literally like, I just have to get the bare bones out so that people know I exist and kind of my, like, why I'm here. And now we can talk about qualifications, because we're past primaries. Like, I wasn't in the primaries either way, but there was so much noise during the primaries that my focus was trying to get enough signatures for my petition to be on the ballot, which didn't pan out. But the website needs some updating to make sure it is as accurate on my qualifications and my beliefs as possible. It's not 100% up to date currently. I mean, it's not inaccurate, but it is not as detailed as it needs to be. And a part of that is a phrase that I want to put on there that is also it's a commonly used phrase that people don't understand is actually, at least a lot of people don't understand, it's actually it's a partial phrase. It's a half quote, right? And it's the jack of all trades, master of none situation, where the rest of that is, but is oftentimes better than a master of one. Like, that's the ending of that phrase. And it's like, and I think it's fitting for a situation for governor specifically, because, like, I'm not supposed to know everything about education. Like, I'm not supposed to know everything about the criminal justice system. Not supposed to know everything about finance. Like, the whole point is for me to know enough about each area to then hire the right people, but also make sure they're doing their job effectively. And I've got to rely on them a little bit, because, like, that's kind of the point. Like, we have to have people who know what they're doing, and you, or not you, the general populace doesn't seem to recognize that. A lot of the questions I get are like, how are you going to fix the education system? I'm like, well, like, we have to vote for people who will actually enact that. But generally speaking, what I would like to do is X, right? It's like, here's what I think would work, but I'm also not an education specialist. So, like, let's get educators in. Let's get people who understand the economics of the school system, and get those people to come up with some ideas. And some people are already working on that. I think you have some good ideas there. And if you want to lean into that and explain kind of what you would like to see for your district, I believe is the right phrase for where you're running. Is that right?
Sure. Well, yeah.
Just
It's
broadly.
interesting that you talk about my sort of district. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Corey Wilson. I'm running for Alabama State Senate District number 7, which will represent Huntsville, Ryland, Gurley, Newmarket, Meridianville, and Hazel Green. Let's see. Phantasma Cat. Jared is not running on the Democratic ticket
Yeah. Oh,
I
so
did
I
want
guess we could have
to
clarified.
get that out there.
Yeah, Corey's running as a
Yeah.
Democrat. I'm running as an
Um,
independent. Yeah, we probably should have clarified
yeah.
that earlier. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, but when we talk about education in Alabama, um, there are a lot of like bureaucratic hurdles for teachers, and we just suffer from chronic underinvestment. Even with Governor Ivey and the legislature signing into law an 8 point something billion-dollar bill for education funding for like the upcoming year, um, Alabama on average spends 5,000 per student per year, whereas the national average is $15,000 per student per year. So even when we like create a historic education spending bill, we're still underfunding education in Alabama. And so one of the things that's on my platform and on sort of like the Alabama Democrats platform generally is not only to properly fund K through 12 education, but to increase pre-K, to create like a universal pre-K system, because we know that for every dollar spent on pre-K education, that you're saving $7 in corrections. And corrections, the corrections budget in Alabama is one of the largest budgets of the state.
It is
So
a
the only like
large chunk.
solutions that the Republicans have is to build more prisons.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a large chunk of our budget every year is corrections related. So you mentioned oh crap, what was it? I lost my train of thought. You mentioned something about the funding, and I wanted to ask a question. Okay, so the
Oh,
$5,000 on average, is that can you explain, because I still can't fully wrap my head around it. So, and if you don't, it's okay, but I don't fully understand
sure.
the unit system, like how that works. If you know, please explain it. If not, like I'm still trying to figure my head around it. Like, because I'd still,
How the funding system
well, like the,
works?
the the unit system. So we fund through units per school, and it's not per student. So like you gave the example of, each student costs about $5,000 each year. We spend
Gotcha.
$5,000, but that we don't say there's X number of students in the school, so they need X times 5,000. It's a weird, convoluted math problem, and I can't explain it because it's not something I have studied in depth. I just know that it's not working currently, and I'm working on trying to find
Yeah.
solutions. So
So, I mean, every state has typically some sort of public education um, budget, as well as typically an office that oversees education. And so it is up to the state to allocate, it's up to the legislature to decide to allocate X number of dollars for public education. So you can basically do simple math with like the number of students enrolled in K through 12 education
right,
versus the total education budget. I'm sure you control for like teacher salaries and maintenance things, and then you divide that number, and that's how you get sort of like the average spending for
right,
your state. Now, I don't, sort of do that math, but there are um, research bodies that do, and it is, I mean, it is widely available. AL.com released an article today that
ooh,
sort of had me incensed, because the title of the article was 50% of Alabama children live in poverty, but they are like beating the national average in math or something like that. And I'm like, you're burying the lead, my friends. 50% of Alabama's students live in poverty. Like, why is that not the thing we're discussing?
yeah, that's that should be top of mind, like, because that's man, that's something that people bring up, and I people bring up poverty, and I'm like, yeah, that literally affects all of the three things that are in my campaign. Like the top 3 points are healthcare, education, and the prison system, and like all three of those are tied to poverty. So like poverty isn't a listed topic, but it's because it literally helps all three of those. So like if we're going to improve healthcare access and quality of healthcare, if we're going to improve education, and we're going to reduce the impacts of the prison system on our state, poverty can hit all three of those. It's just not a like a quote unquote bullet point, but like if you aren't aware, not you specifically, but the audience broadly, if you're not aware, like the minimum wage income that the federal government puts out is what the state uses. We don't have our own minimum wage set. We just use the stuff that the federal government's forcing us to pay people as a minimum. And it's nowhere near enough. No matter what county you live in, it is less than half of what you need to live in the most, I call it economically friendly county. Like you need $35,000 as a single person per year to live there, and that's
Correct.
that's like $15 an hour, not $7.25. So,
well, the average U.S. I'm sorry, the median U.S. household income is $33,000 a year.
yeah, yep,
And you know, I saw something the other day where people were talking about, like you talked about, minimums.
yeah,
Anytime that the states have tried to make an argument for states' rights, which you know, it's states' rights is a myth, because the only thing that the states who always talk about states' rights are doing is deciding which people to strip of their rights, right? And then the federal government has to get involved and yada yada yada.
yep,
No constitution in the United States, be it the federal constitution or any other state's constitution, has a specific prescription for human rights, even though the nation as a whole has signed on to a treaty.
we haven't ratified it.
Says that we are.
Right? That's the one that
We haven't?
I believe that's the one we haven't fully ratified because it covers.
Gotcha.
Again, I'm still like everybody who follows this account knows. Like this has not been a lifelong goal. This is not something I've been researching to do for years. October last year, I got pissed and was like, nobody else is saying anything, so I'll run. Like somebody else helped me out and got the campaign started with me. But like this isn't. I'm not a long-term politician who's like, yeah, like let me start low and let me build it up. And it's like, no, I'm just pissed, and nobody else is saying the things that I want to say, so I'm gonna say it loud, and we'll see how far it gets us. And it's working really well so far. We got a long way to go, but it's working rather well. And the reason I say that is like the research that I was doing was housing related, so it was talking about housing as a human right, and the either the World Health Organization or the UN, one of the two has a human rights proclamation, for lack of better terms, that everybody signed on to, and the U.S. agreed to it and said that's a great idea, but we never ratified it as a country. So like we were like, yeah, that sounds great. Like everybody should do that, except maybe we won't officially do it. We just think it's a good idea generally. I'm gonna while we keep talking, I want your opinion on because I've said this a bunch, and somebody asked on Facebook. They asked about the lottery to help with funding. I want your opinion because I haven't talked to a whole lot of people I agree with generally talk about the lottery, and then I'll give my feelings on it.
Yeah. Well, even though I personally don't really gamble, the criminalization of gambling in Alabama, I think, has sort of like, it has become a problem. The lottery, I think, has like somewhere between 60 and 70% approval across all of Alabama. And so it's one of those things to me that is akin to like cannabis legalization, is that the people want it. We're arresting people for it needlessly, and it'll bring revenue into the state. Because I know that people in my family, I mean, we're in North Alabama, so the closest state with a lottery to us is Tennessee.
Yeah.
And people will make that drive. I mean, they'll go to Tennessee, they'll go to Georgia, they'll go to Mississippi to play the lottery, and they are stimulating those states' economies. So I do think that if we did establish a lottery in the state of Alabama, and we again use those funds for things like education and public transportation, that it could be a net benefit.
Okay. So my rebuttal has been this, and I'm not going to deny that it will bring in revenue for the state. My pushback has always been that people want to push it as a way of bringing in revenue to help. Typically, it's education or some other situation where we don't have enough funding already, and predominantly that funding is sorely lacking in the poorer communities of our state. And traditionally, from the research that I've seen at least, the lottery is disproportionately used by already impoverished communities. Like rich people typically aren't playing the lottery to the extent that our poorer communities are, and I have a problem with putting that burden on the communities we're trying to help. So, and it differs for me for things like marijuana because the lottery is giving them nothing of immediate value, no material value immediately. It is a hope that they'll get out of poverty with the side small benefit of the dollars that are going in. Some of that goes back into education. Whereas on something like marijuana or some other tax on a physical good of some type, the people who purchase it get something immediately in return, and then whether or not that is as good for them is a different question. So like marijuana, whatever, it's medicine, generally speaking. Like it's there to help. It's there to help with some ailment, whether it is like pain from cancer or if it's just anxiety. Like I'm not a doctor, I'm not prescribing it for anybody, like, but I understand that's what people use it for, and who am I to say that that's an invalid way to help your symptoms? I'm not a doctor, so I can't say it's good or bad, but people do, and it's working for some people. So that's an immediate benefit that they're getting, and then the tax money that comes from that, we can use to fund education or something else. But the lottery it's tricky for me. Like I get that it would be a revenue stream, but I don't see that outweighing the fact that it's being used. The taxes from it are being used to fund the people who are predominantly using it. It's like I think we could find a different solution that could bring in as much, if not more, money. So that's where I'm at.
Well, listen, I mean, we sort of have already touched on it, which is a legal cannabis market.
Yeah.
I mean, it'll that alone. Whew. So for me on my economic platform, one of the things that I would like to see, because to me, the money that we need to do things we want to do already exists, right? They're simply not allocating the funding to things that will help people. And in Alabama, we have had a Republican supermajority in the legislature for a decade.
Yeah.
Which means that if the Alabama state legislature was dedicated to helping Alabamians, they have had 3 presidential cycles, 2 Senate cycles, and 5 congressional cycles, right? They have had enough time to enact the policies that would help Alabamians. The economic policies that I'm interested immediately in, and that, again, some folks on the Democratic side are interested in, and things that I know that you'll probably be on board with, but I won't speak for you.
Okay.
Ending the state sales tax on groceries.
Mm-hmm.
That will put more money in the people's pockets.
Yeah.
Again, universal pre-K will reduce child care costs. Expanding Medicaid will create nearly $3 billion in economic activity in the first 5 years alone, and will continue to have positive trickle-down effects from people joining sort of like the healthcare industry.
And
I want to doctors, more nurses, more, and build more infrastructure.
I want to put one thing on the Medicaid thing real quick. The Medicaid, the thing that people don't realize is with that acceptance of the enhanced Medicaid funding from the federal government, like it is 90% covered by the federal government. If by the last research I saw, 90% of it's covered by the federal government, 10% we would have to cover as a state, which that 10% of coverage or 10% of funding would help us cover 43% of the uninsured residents of the state who don't have health insurance. And like to me that's not a question, that's a yes. And
so that also has like a plurality of support. It does poll in the high 60s in Alabama. Like the people, they may not have wanted it initially because, and this is one of my biggest critiques of the Obama era, is that his administration let the Republicans throw in, right? The Affordable Care, the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act, screening for pre-existing conditions. There were all these sort of good things, but they labeled it Obamacare, and then suddenly no red state wanted to touch it, right? And now here we are 10 years later, literally 10 years later, and all these red states are begging for that money.
Yeah.
So there's a comment that I did want to address because this affected one of my friends.
Okay.
They're not undocumented. They are a green card holder, although they are on their way to becoming naturalized. But
Okay.
they got pregnant in Alabama, and they did not qualify for Medicaid assistance under current law.
Yeah.
Even though their income probably would allow them, with how strict Alabama is with the Medicaid rolls.
Right.
If we had passed if we had taken the Medicaid expansion, then my friend would not have had so much financial hardship and difficulty bringing their first child into the world.
Yeah. Yeah, and Heather,
Lynn Nicole, I agree. We do need universal health care.
Both of us agree on that.
Already have it, but that's just not something that I'm able to legislate on necessarily.
Yeah.
I mean, I can
propose things.
A bill if I get elected.
Yeah.
I can propose a bill and things like that.
Yeah.
But right now, in Alabama, we aren't even taking progressive steps to get people, affordable and accessible health care.
Yeah.
So even though Obamacare is a stopgap to where we should be going,
right.
People in America, in Alabama, the people in Alabama don't even have access to it fully.
Right. That's what I said. Like there's a large chunk that we could just. It's not half. It's 43%. The last stats that I saw. But we could literally just get 43% of the uninsured people insurance, and it's not a small number. I don't have the stats pulled up in front of me, but it's not like we're talking about a couple hundred people. It's hundreds of thousands of people that don't have insurance, and we could solve that. I wanted to.
I think the total number of uninsured Alabamians that Alabama Rise put out a few months ago, it was I want to say it's like 200,000 or 300,000 uninsured people in Alabama, and Alabama has a population of about 5 million. So that is almost, that's like 7% of the state.
Yeah, it's not a small chunk. Somebody mentioned earlier about keeping money in the state, and I think they were talking about the lottery. And I'm trying to scroll back. If you're watching another platform, you can see it. I get it. You want to keep the money here, but the thing that people haven't been able to show me wouldn't happen is more poor people trying to get out of poverty by spending more of their money on the lottery. So I get that some of it's leaving, but I'm saying we have better ways of bringing funding to the state. I'm not worried about the small amount that's leaving. I want to have more revenue. I don't want the little bit of revenue to come to our state or stay in our state. I want to bring more revenue into the funnel, so to speak. And that's where I'm focused. So Terry mentioned a couple things. I mentioned that we should get on their podcast or their show. I don't know if it's a podcast. Terry, send me a feedback form on my website, and we'll take a look and see if that's something we can do. And then even with insurance, copays for any test if you're sick or injured is absolutely insane. And yeah, that's again, we're not at the point where it is like a universal single payer system. So we're stuck with where we are, but we can at least try to help offset some of that burden for everybody. That's the goal. So Von Groach, is it a small amount? Have some numbers ready for that. So my point is, I would much rather focus on a bigger number like marijuana. Like that will be a bigger number than the lottery, the number of people that are spending money on the lottery out of state. If it's not, I will be thoroughly surprised. It still won't change my mind on whether or not we should be letting the predominantly impoverished communities fund their own education through taxes through the lottery. I haven't seen a good rebuttal on that part of it. I'm not saying that we won't implement it, because I will be elected as governor and I don't have full control of anything. That's not the way this works. So yeah, Von Groach, please, I implore you to find some of those numbers, because everyone else asked about the lottery. I'm not proposing one. So if you would like us to look at a lottery, please find me some numbers and use the feedback form. I'll take a look at them seriously.
So the current estimate, I had to look it up.
Are you doing it live on the
Political
show?
analyst Steve, yes, political analyst Steve Flowers. It doesn't matter. They estimate $200 million.
For out of state revenue leaving the state to go to
Yeah,
lottery. Okay. Yeah.
that is the current best figure.
So Colorado state made 423 million last year. So here's the flip side. Like, why do people spend money on the lottery? Like, what is the reason for doing that? Predominantly is so that they can have more money. Like, they're taking a chance to get more money. So if we can solve the healthcare situation and the education system, and we can get better people better pay, why do we care if we have a lottery? Like, the lottery, the whole point of the lottery is so that you hopefully will get out of poverty. Well, let's solve the poverty problem. Let's not, like, that's where, like, I get that
Jared,
it could be a
listen,
stopgap,
man, I
but
love you, but sometimes people just like to gamble.
oh
Like
no, no,
sometimes it
again,
isn't about.
well then they can go out of state. Like, that's fine. Like, I
Okay.
personally, I'm not worried about it. Like, if the state proposes it, and
Yeah.
like I can't stop it from happening anyway, I can try. But if it, look, let's be
Yeah.
real. If the legislature proposed a lottery, and it made general sense, I wouldn't try to veto it based on that belief. I'm just not going to push for a lottery. Like, I'm not going to push for one because I have concerns about the reason for having it in the first place doesn't make sense, for the reason everybody usually proposes it. Like, if you just want to gamble, then like let's make gambling legal, and then people can have places to gamble.
Correct.
But like, not a state lottery that's there to fund taxes. Like, there's a difference there. Like, I don't care if you gamble, do your thing. Like, whatever. Let's make it illegal to do, if it's not already, because I don't gamble. Let's make it illegal, or make it legal to do it online if it's not already. Like, if it isn't, let's do that.
And
Have your fun.
since Heather Lynn made the observation that Colorado brought in nearly $500 million in their state lottery last year, I just looked up a quick figure. They made nearly 5 times that with their legal cannabis market,
Yeah.
$2.2 billion. Um, and while I'm still thinking about it, I know I was like briefly talking about like an economic platform. So again, ending the sales tax on groceries, universal pre-K, um, legal cannabis market, and then we would need to like levy a tax on the largest corporations. One thing that I love about Alabama is that most people in Alabama, 97% of Alabamians are employed by a local business, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so what that means is that you hope the local businesses are not exploiting their workers. We can, study that, investigate that, but the taxes that we need to levy would be on corporations, and I don't think that would hurt the local businesses at
Yeah.
all. We also, could raise the wage here. Birmingham tried in
I think it was.
2016,
I was. It was 2016 because that's when we
to raise
passed.
the minimum wage to $10 for
Yeah.
that city, and then the state legislature got involved and they smacked it down. But what I wanted to say earlier about states' rights is that while most of the time states that argue for states' rights are specifically trying to target people to remove their rights, um, states also have the ability to create more progressive policies than the federal government. So California, New York, these states that people always are like, it's trash, they're violent. It's like California is the third largest economy in the world. In the world. And then New York is not far behind. But they have very sort of like tight minimum wage laws. They have very tight anti-pollution laws. Like, if your state is not trying to outdo the federal government in enumerating your rights, then it's not a good state.
Yeah, and I think that's why some people end up running. I can speak from experience on that one. Like, and it hasn't, and that's the I don't know, the battle that I have, internally and a little externally, is I'm fully aware that if if the federal government retracted all of the amendments and everything in the Constitution that wasn't written in the beginning, like literally just straight Constitution, no amendments, I would generally be okay. I mean, not 100% because there'd be wealth above mine, but like my rights are for the most part written in the main Constitution. Like not all of them, but like I'm a white man who owns property. Like I was the intended target for that Constitution. There's a large chunk of our country who was not, and that's what I'm trying to fight for. And it feels weird to be like, because what I didn't want to come across as is like, the shining knight, or the knight in shining armor, like trying to save the day thing.
Savior.
Yeah, the white savior piece. Like it's like that's not what I'm attempting to do, but I know that in our state, my face will go further and reach people that other people wouldn't. And for better or worse, like that's where I'm at. And nobody else was stepping up anyway. Like nobody for this position, right? The people that have stepped up and the people that have made it, I don't agree with still. Like I didn't agree with any of the candidates that were running during the primaries, and I don't like our ending. The two in the main parties currently. Like they don't speak for me, and that's why I'm still running. And I don't want you to feel like you have to talk about anything on either side, because I don't know what that involves, because I'm not in a party. So you don't have to say anything other than whatever you're comfortable saying. But I had to get that off my chest. It's like,
I'm happy to talk about party politics. I'm happy to speak about whatever. This is sort of, I guess, a question I wanted to ask is, what do you want to talk about, Jared?
Man, my biggest thing is like the thing that I don't think enough people know about is how this system works, and I'm still learning it. Like I know about it from a citizen's perspective, very loosely, because I just got I wasn't actively involved when I was 18 when I could be, right? It didn't happen until I was probably 22. It's probably when I started actually paying attention, and things immediately started not making sense. And that's it slowly is built to the point where we are now, and some of it still doesn't make sense. So like, for example, I don't fully understand the process pre-primary for running in a party. So can you explain the general process of like how you become a candidate for a party? Because I started to run after the cutoff was. I think the cutoff was in November, I believe. Is that right? And like I didn't decide to run until January. So like there was no chance it was going to happen. I have other concerns.
Actually, you still could have qualified. So I'll talk about I guess Alabama.
Yeah.
So to run with one of the two major parties in Alabama, you can begin fundraising a year before the election.
Right.
So if our election is November 8th, 2022, that means that your fundraising can start, November 9th, 2021. Once you raise $1,000, you have to declare that. $1,000 typically is the filing fee to register with either party. So you raise that sum, you declare your candidacy, you go to the party, you basically fill out an intake form that's like, this is who I am, this is the district I want to run in, here's my filing fee, et cetera, et cetera. And that is like the easiest way to get your name on the ballot, and it is why I believe most candidates elect to choose a party with which to run. Because you've been telling me how difficult it has been to run as an independent.
It is.
In this state. And so you said you just raised like the $1,000 like fee that you have to start reporting for your campaign finance.
Yeah,
stuff, right?
from January to June. The actual day was like June 26th. You pick the day and then you have to report by the first Tuesday of the next month. But yeah, it was like June 26th was when it took that long to hit the $1,000 mark. Now, most people who are running have people who can typically help get them kickstarted, and I am not in that boat. Most of my friends are in. We're all blue collar, don't make a whole lot of money, and like they've helped out, and most of them are helping with their time more than anything. But the actual donations, I had a few friends who kicked in 50, 60, $100 here, but to get to the $1,000 mark, I'm running as an independent, so nobody knows who I am. They have no proof that I actually care, right? I could be a grifter, like that's 100%. Like I get it. I fully understand. And then I don't, because I don't have a number, not a number, a letter next to my name. Like there's no perceived validation because of the number next to your, or the letter next to your name, and that it made it difficult. After saying the same thing for 6 months and saying like, hey, I really just want to help you as a person. Like I don't care about anything else other than we've got to do something about the prison system. We have to get people better access to healthcare, and we have to fix the education stuff. Like that's what we have to do. And it's the same thing that both of my opponents have said. Like they say the same thing, at least as bullet points. And I think the difference is especially on the prison side, is the approach to how that needs to happen. Because part of it's like, well, we just need to, we need better buildings. We need to fund them better so that we can, better take care of the people who are in the boxes. And, the flip side for me is like, no, we shouldn't be putting more people in boxes. Like we've been doing that for centuries, and that does not work. It doesn't actually do what we are telling people. And like, if you want to keep building more prisons, you need to tell people it's because they're for profit. Like you need to be telling people that. I know you report it officially. Like go look up the money that the Alabama Department of Corrections makes every year. Now, not every year. I can't say that because during COVID they ran at a loss. But prior, go look at the reports. They're public information. Go look at it. Like they operate at a profit, and the state gets that money. And like that, to me, is disgusting or abhorrent, whichever word you want to use. Like I just, Laney, Wilson, Corey. I was looking at your name. Are you good with a third person jumping in?
I don't know about this account, Garrett. Lana Del Rey Colt is back.
Oh, geez. I didn't see the name. Come on. I'll give you a shot. Like, Lana, for real, I will give you a shot. But I reserve the right to just kick you. So, like, not me kick you out. I'm not going to physically kick you. I got to be careful what I say. We'll give it a shot. I'll try. We will give it a shot. All right, what's going on?
Go kill yourself.
Yep.
Yeah, that's what I figured.
Get
Okay.
rid of them.
Yep. No, they dropped out themselves. Like, I'll give people a shot, but like that's what we're up against. Like what I just finished saying was I want to give people better healthcare, better education, and stop putting people in prisons and boxes and using them for slave labor. And those are the responses that we get. Like, positive message. Yeah. And they dropped out because they know that was the wrong thing to do. Like, and for anybody watching, like, I'm sorry, but this is what we deal with. Not all the time. Corey, I don't know how much you deal with it. I assume it's a lot, but I haven't been able to catch many of your lives.
I get a couple of trolls here and there, but I don't believe in. I don't want to say I don't believe in confrontation. I don't believe in ad hominem attacks, right?
Yeah.
So if somebody is insulting you in person, or even if it's online, if you simply like keep your composure and don't engage, they won't get the satisfaction. I remember somebody commented, like they duetted or stitched one of my videos and basically were saying like, you are from Alabama, my family's from around that way, I vote Republican even though I identify as a libertarian, and you seem like a good guy, you seem like you want to do stuff that's, good for people, but you're asking like, people to reject white supremacy, but the way he couched the language was, you are asking white people to white voters to take up like black issues, but you are, calling them racist in the same breath, yada, 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 that's not how you do it. My response was, well, I didn't ask necessarily for white people to take up black issues. What I said is that Alabama Republicans are crooks, and then, what up, Mo? And then I listed sort of like just the public corruption that I have seen in the past 3 or 4 years, right? You got Sheriff Mike Blakely in Limestone County embezzling. You have the superintendent in Limestone County embezzling. You have Mike Hubbard using his office for personal gain, and then not, being sentenced by a jury of his peers, being found guilty by a jury of his peers, and stalling the process of him going to prison. Um, Public corruption in Alabama is high. Like, people talk about taxpayer dollars, stealing them, wasting them, whatever. Obviously, our Attorney General Steve Marshall wastes money all the time, bringing cases before the court. He got lucky with Shelby v. Holder, and now he's in D.C. all the time.
You mentioned a sheriff. Was that the one that that paid people, or sorry, used the food budget to basically didn't use all of the food budget and then pocketed the money? Is that the same sheriff?
I'm sorry, I got a call. What was the question?
Oh, yeah, no. So you mentioned a sheriff earlier from Limestone County, and I don't remember where this occurred, but 2017, 2018, there was a sheriff who basically didn't spend all of the food budget for their facilities and pocketed the extra, essentially. Is that who you're talking about?
I think that was Mike Blakely.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
And for the record, it's like $750,000. Like, it's
Robert
not
Hunter
a
asked
small
if
amount.
they can join, and
we got a slight delay. Sorry.
And Robert is definitely like, cool.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, we got dropped. Corey got a phone call, I guess. Yeah, I don't remember. It was Ettrican in Etowah County. Somebody was talking about jumping on, and Corey would vouch for him. You can jump on. I don't mind bringing people on. If they get rowdy, so to speak, I'll just kick them off. Like, they're not going to hurt my feelings. Like, I understand that there are people out here who are just here to troll. So you can try. It's not going to rile me up. You would. What just happened is not. It's light compared to what's been said to me in the past. So hopefully Corey will jump back here in a second. I want to respond to somebody earlier. Corey, I sent you an invite, so you should be able to jump in. Once someone starts showing visual facts on corruption, people just need to see it all in one. Heather, I'm not sure I follow. Are you looking for like an infographic? Because I've had people offer their services for like design work, and we can come up with an infographic on corruption. Let's do it. Like, that sounds like an interesting way to use somebody's suggestion or request for helping. Here we go. All right, so Corey should be back in. Corey, somebody said that you would vouch for them, and I don't remember who it was, but
yeah, Robert Hunter. Go ahead and let Robert in the room.
Yeah.
Robert is a great organizer based in Etowah County.
Cool.
Robert's fantastic.
Sweet. Bring him on. Like, you don't have to get vouched. Like, I'll bring you on. If you have 1,000 people, then you've done something to get enough followers, and you will either last. You will last as long as you last. I'll say it that way. Robert, thanks for jumping on.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. I don't even think I have 1,000 followers, to be completely honest with you. But
If you
I was
don't,
actually
that's
wanting to
surprising.
ask you a quick question specifically around criminal justice.
Sure.
I didn't know if you had noticed, but one of the things that I have been looking into recently was the fact that mysteriously there is a 4-year gap in between spikes in our criminal justice system when it comes to arrests, convictions, and overall interactions with law enforcement. Mysteriously around the same times that these certain people get elected.
Yeah, it's super weird, isn't it?
These spikes, like a great example being the last spike was between 2013 to 2014, and then there was another spike between 2017 and 2018.
Yeah. I haven't looked at spikes in admissions or arrests, but I did notice, and I think it was a news article that brought my attention to it. But the denial of restoring voting rights through the Pardon and Parole Board took a nosedive in 2018 or 2019, and like, the Board of Pardon and Paroles, from all that I've found and can read, and I've got to reach out to a couple organizations who have reached out since I've gained some attention here recently, who want to give me some insights, because they were commenting on one of my videos that was talking about it. But essentially, like, the Board of Pardon and Paroles are the ones that are responsible for pardoning anybody. And what I didn't realize until getting into all this is like pardoning isn't just like relieving you of the guilt, right? It's like, oh, like you're pardoned, like you didn't actually do this. Like that's the only way you can get your rights back in our state. If you want to get your right to vote back, you have to be pardoned. And there's a group of 3 people who do that in our state. And they went 1 year, they switched in 1 year from not admitting, what is it? Granting, right? They went from 1 year granting 80% and denying 20%, and they flipped it and they started denying 80% and only granted 20%. And the part that's more infuriating is that they, from everything I can read, they have the leeway to pick how much they give back. So let's say it's somebody who was convicted of a firearms crime and they lost their right to a firearm, but they also lost their right to vote. My understanding is they can just say, hey, you don't get your firearms back, but like you can vote. Like they can give you part of that. And the last stats I was looking at, I think, was 2020, and we gave back, as you know, the Board of Pardon and Paroles, they gave back, I think, less than 2% of requested rights for voting. So like if you look at all of them, 700 of them, whatever it was, less than 2% were granted their right to vote back. And it's like, man, like, come on, like this, it can't not be intentional. Like there's no way. Like I don't know, maybe that's my job. You know what? You bring up a good point. They are appointed by the governor, but do you know who picks the ones that I can choose from? Because I don't get free reign. I can't just say, hey, Joe, Susie, and Robert, you're going to be the Board of Pardon and Paroles. Are you aware of who selects them in the first place? I'm asking the job. Corey, if you know, you can answer. But
yeah, I don't even think I know the answer to that question.
It's actually the people in the legislature. There are 3 people in the legislature that get to pick those. So I have to pick from the ones that they give me. So I mean, yeah, sure, I can pick them, but like, you know, if you give me 5 racist white men, then I have to pick from 5 racist white men. Like that doesn't help me any. Like like, okay, like sure, like. I guess let's put the onus on the person that doesn't really have any control on that. And it's something that I keep learning. Everything I look up, the position of governor, and somebody mentioned it earlier, like you need to do it local, and I fully agree. Like we have to do this locally. Actually, no, Job, it's written into the Constitution or the state code. I have no choice. They get to decide who is picked, and there are qualifications, and it's supposed to equally represent the state by a varying degree of demographics. So it's, you know, age, gender, age, sex, because our state's ridiculous, but age, sex, socioeconomic status, and location, I think, off the top of my head. But the way it's written is not, unless if you have something that shows me I get to give them the stipulations, please tell me, because I would love to correct it. That would be great. I would love to have more information that I can actually affect more change, because I'm all here for it. But that, from what I gather, I don't have a whole lot of control there. So if you have more info, I'd love to know it, because I'm the dude that's learning and trying to figure it out.
Do we know if anyone is trying to build out a Federalist Society styled bench specifically around independent support or filling in governmental seats?
There is actually a group on TikTok that just started, because there's this guy, God, I can't remember his name offhand, but he has built this ridiculous spreadsheet of data. I don't know if you've seen those videos going around, but he has a spreadsheet that he's just been injecting data into. Like pick a stat around government and the states in general, and he has a way to filter it. And it's like pick income, guns, like recent, like the split on the parties for the different positions throughout the state, governor, lieutenant governor, you know, all the different seats. And the most recent thing was open, unopposed seats. So basically, somebody mentioned in an offhanded video, they're like, yeah, I was doing some research and I was, you know, trying to figure out how many unopposed seats were in the states around me, and I had to stop at 521 in 3 states or whatever the number was, but it was some ridiculous number where there were un, unfathomable amounts of positions that were unopposed. They just didn't have competition. So they're actually, it's kind of late in the game, but they're doing it anyway. And I'm here for it because I understand the late in the game run. They He's trying to build out a coalition of people who are like, hey, if you're pissed, find out the open seat next to you and run. Like, just run, because you could just win because it's unopposed. You just have to out compete that one person. Like, and they're probably not doing anything because they think they're unopposed, and you could slide in and just win. Whoever mentioned they love their videos. Okay, yeah, Heather, the Nick Powers guy. Like, there's no affiliation. I don't know the guy. I just respect his data nerdery. I'm all here for it because he's all for, like, you ask him a question and he will find the data, put it in the spreadsheet, and show you. I'm sure he's too big to answer every question, but he answers some really cool ones. So.
Also, if I may, Robert, I think to bring sort of like a little more specificity to your question, I don't know if there are groups or even caucuses inside the state legislature who have like specific folks in mind for building out the bench and other appointed positions. I know that Rep. England championed and sponsored a bill for voting rights restoration, which did pass, and so the mechanisms to get your voting rights back should be a little bit easier. The state constitution or the state code gives huge amounts of power for the governor to appoint folks, and so the next step would be for coalition building to find a candidate that can win the governorship for progressive ideas and ideals.
Yeah. So, there's.
But I do know that folks in the state legislature, I have spoken with folks on the Democratic side in the state legislature who want to address these issues, but it's a power building move that will take likely 2 or 3 cycles before we're able to get there.
Right, and I can personally attest to the state house district that I'm actually from specifically had a situation where the state party had just said, well, this isn't a winnable race unless a more conservative person wins. They're like, well, the sitting state rep, Gil Isbell, he's definitely going to win. So, there's no reason for us to put up a person. And then he lost. And what could have been a competitive race now, for all intents and purposes, is down the drain. Although I'm talking with people and I am getting other opinions, I may end up running as an independent for that seat.
Yeah. For smaller seats, it's a bit easier.
Right now, since Jared sort of asked me about like my decision to run and party politics and things like that, these races are definitely winnable. My current strategy is to have just a strong ground game. Donations help, political advertising helps, but most of the time, if you look at AOC, for example, she ousted an incumbent in a primary simply because he was not visible or active in his district. He deigned to come when, he had to, but going door to door, getting name recognition is one way to do it. And I will say that in Madison County specifically, in the 2020 election, Governor Ivey, the exit returns for that election had like Joe Biden specifically and other Democrats up heavily over another statewide candidate, Governor Ivey, and so the analysts they look at what they think is flippable, and even if they think that a seat is flippable, it doesn't mean that they're going to give you necessarily the resources to do it. They'll give you some help, but even myself as the current like Democratic nominee for the district I'm running, keeping an eye on what races are quote unquote winnable. I can't speak for every county in Alabama because there are 67 of them, but I know that in Madison County, with the organizing that's been going on in North Alabama generally, I think it's a little bit more progressive than a lot of the states south of Montgomery. Um, that we have 6 folks who are running for state legislature. 2 are incumbents, and then Mallory has run before, and so we have 3 first-time candidates who we are hoping we have good odds, and we are hoping to flip these seats. So that would be the state senate picking up. There'll be 2 seats in the state senate flipping, and then 4 seats in the not 4, 2, and then 2 more seats. Yes, and then 2 more seats in the state house flipping.
So you mentioned something that I assumed but had never heard anybody say, and you mentioned that you still kind of have to appease the federal, the national party. What? How much? What do you mean? How much of that can you get into?
So
Not, and I don't mean in like,
candidate,
I don't mean in like a like get yourself in trouble way, but like, what is that? Is that something that you have to show numbers for? Or like, what does that mean?
Yes, and so we do have a way to do that. It's mostly direct voter contact. They basically want to see that you are calling in the district and canvassing and things like that, which of course is how you win races anyway. But it again, oftentimes it doesn't matter if you end up being the nominee. Um, the powers that be want you to prove yourself through fundraising or direct voter contact. And as you know, campaigning is expensive, so they often are more willing to spend their money on the back end instead of the front end, which is what can make campaigning so difficult. Like, there is no sort of like a assignment of vendors from DC or anything like that. Every time you campaign, especially again if you're a first-time candidate, you're building your operation from scratch. So having experience working on campaigns and knowing sort of like the general rhythm of them is helpful as you build out your campaign infrastructure. But like the DNC is not currently funding me.
Right.
And that's fine. I don't necessarily need it, and I am critical of the organization. So
Yeah. So in that,
not that. I mean,
so what I was gonna say is one of the questions I get asked pretty regularly, and actually I'm not gonna use a name because I don't know how. They didn't schedule a meeting publicly. They also haven't scheduled a meeting, but they requested me to call. Somebody who is in the state party has asked me to contact them because they're curious why I didn't run as a Democrat. And part of it is I assumed it was too late when I started to run in January. Like, we were already in full swing. My understanding was that I had passed the deadline to sign up as a Democrat. So that's my quick and easy answer.
You know that the deadline to sign up was January 28th. That was the deadline to
Gotcha.
declare.
Okay, and I'll have to go look at when I declared with the state. It was very close to that deadline. It was in January, so it was very, very close. And if I had to have a filing fee, there was no way that was going to happen. So that may have been what it ended up being, or where my head went with that thought. The flip side is, I respect that you're trying to run under the Democratic Party. I find, and I find the two parties as parties don't seem to care about the people, and I can't justify putting that name next to me when they don't seem to want to implement, as a party, don't seem to want to implement that change. And that's that's where I'm at, and that I understand not everybody believes that way, and that's why you're willing to run under that party, because you you believe that it is something worth doing. And that's there's a longer answer behind that I'm gonna probably talk to that person when I call them, because they asked, and I'll have to be honest with them and say, hey, do you want the quick short answer that I can give you in a text, or do you want to have a meeting? Because there's.
I will say that in that same video that I described earlier, where a guy was like, you're running as a Democrat, I vote, Republican, even though I consider myself a libertarian, yada yada yada. One of the things he said the things that hurts local people who run on the Democratic platform is national Democrats. And I mean, I don't think he could have been more correct. More specifically, Senate and presidential Democrats. As far as like the party system is concerned, I did not run on the Democratic ticket for legitimacy or anything like that. And the goals of and platforms of state parties vary state to state. The Nevada Democratic Party, which, that is where former Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid is from, like, they had a huge clash between progressive Democrats and more centrist Democrats, and the progressive Democrats won and basically took over the party, and have passed laws. They have worked with legislators to pass laws like workplace protections. Like a workers' party is more of the vibe that they have.
Okay.
They made a law, like their legislature passed a law. Democrats in the legislature passed a law that said employers cannot contact employees outside of like business hours and things like that.
Yeah.
But for me, I chose the Democratic brand again because it is the party that generally aligns most closely to my goals and values.
Yeah.
And I don't know. Next cycle, who knows? If I win this cycle, maybe next cycle I'll run as an independent. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
What I am sure of is that the American people's calculation is correct, that neither party, at least at the national level, is concerned with the best interests of the people.
Yeah.
Which you can see by the inaction on the left, and people can say whatever critique they want. They can say that young people are angry, but young people aren't reliable voters. They can say, that Biden doesn't have the majorities that he needs in the Senate. Like, they can say all of that stuff, but when Roe v. Wade was overturned, the way that the Supreme Court that they were going to, the first thing that Dems did was try to fundraise off of that.
Yeah.
Which I think was rather gross.
But not off brand.
Gross.
Not off brand. And like that's nationally speaking, again, like my problem with the local Democratic Party long term, and like I'm not saying it's entirely their fault locally, but that party hasn't. I haven't seen them do anything, and I get that they have we have a supermajority on the Republican side. Like, I get it, but my understanding, and that's a layperson because I'm not in that, but as an everyday person who just got fed up and decided to run, my perception was that the state party and the national party are more intertwined than I think that they actually are. But if I didn't know that as a normal person, neither does everybody else. And like for me, I couldn't tie myself to that because like I'm aiming for the 1.4 million people who didn't vote in 2020, and like that sounds like a crazy number, but like they're like straight raw data. It's 1.4 million people who didn't vote. They were registered and just didn't. And the comparison for me is 950 straight ticket Republicans and 950,000 and 550,000 straight ticket Democrat, ballpark numbers because it's like 967 or whatever. But we're ballparking, right? We've got 1.4 million who didn't vote, and then we have 950 and 550, and then the difference is the people who are doing the research, right? And they're looking and actually caring about who they're picking. And for me, my perception and
expunge from the party was less likely to negotiate in Congress. A great example being, I don't think, based on the Republican Party today, that they would be willing to negotiate to bring an EPA system um, to life. I just don't think they'd be willing to negotiate that today. They're hardliners, and they got rid of most of the people that would be willing to negotiate.
I wanted to say something. There's a passage, Myra, from the Jefferson Memorial on the southeast portico is an excerpt from a letter to Samuel Kirchville. This is sort of one of those. This is one of the things that like Jefferson wrote that people praise him highly for, even though he's looking like up at us from hell right now. I am not an advocate for frequent changes in laws and constitutions, but laws and institutions must go hand in hand with the progress of the human mind. As that becomes more developed, more enlightened, as new discoveries are made, new truths discovered, and manners and opinions change, with the change of circumstances, institution must advance also to keep pace with the times. We might as well require a man to wear still the coat which fitted him when a boy, as a civilized society to remain ever under the regimen of their barbarous ancestors. So that's the quote about updating constitutions. Jared, it seems like the people enjoy these lives. I'm happy to come back
Yeah,
anytime.
this is good stuff.
I'm gonna hop off. I have to go to work in an hour.
Oh no.
I love you all. Feel free to reach out to me. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have, as is Jared, as
Yeah.
I'm sure also is Robert. Jared, thank you for hosting this, and thank you for having me.
Of course. No, thank you for jumping on, and I appreciate the support and love you've shown, because that has been few and far between from candidates that are running. Generally speaking, most of and again, I don't meet most of them also, but the ones that I've seen online.
Well, it's like I told you. I have learned in my own experience that once you're running for office, it's rarely a team sport.
Yeah, should be, because
But we can change that.
it should be. We should be working towards. Well, again, that's a philosophical point, I think, but some of us believe that we should be working towards the greater good for people, and that only works when we work together as a group, because that's what society and civilization is. Like it is people working together for the betterment of each other. And anthropologists agree, so don't argue with me. Argue with them. Corey, have a good night. Robert, thank you for jumping on. Everybody else, hang out, and people who mentioned wanting to help out, literally those three things right there for both of us. You want to interact with content, donate to us, and volunteer with us, pick one. If you're not familiar, go scroll up a little bit and find Corey's info, but it's Wilson for the people here on TikTok, and look for Corey Wilson online. And then for me, just click the link in the bio. I'm delaying long enough for you to do that if you want to. Robert, thank you very much. I don't think that I'm friends with you yet, but it won't let me click your name in the live. So I'm going to try and find a comment and then go backwards from there. Let's see. And follow. Cool. So we are connected. Every other platform, you are still streaming. I'm not entirely sure my mic stayed on the whole time.